Welcome to the Find My Catalyst podcast. We all have problems we're looking to solve, and we know that there are solutions out there, but we struggle with this. How do we find that solution? Where does the nudge come from to help us take that next step and start solving tough problems? The intention of this podcast is to help you find your catalyst and take that next step. I'm Mike Simmons. I am the founder of Catalyst Sale, and I am extremely excited to have Brynne Tillman on the podcast today. She is, well, most of you know Brynne. If you haven't had a chance to follow what she's doing on LinkedIn, you need to do so, and we'll include links in the show notes. Brynne is transforming the way that professionals sell by converting connections to conversations. Let's get to the conversation. Brynne, it is awesome to see you. How are you doing?
Good, Mike. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation. There are, and people heard it in the intro, the LinkedIn whisperer. Where did that come from? Like, where did that first?
I got named that. I was doing a keynote for IES, Institute for Excellence in Sales with Fred Diamond, and he introduced me as that. And this is probably going back maybe 5 or 6 years. And I'm like, I'm keeping that.
It's awesome. So LinkedIn's been around for more than 5 or 6 years?
I'm over a dozen years on LinkedIn now. Isn't that crazy?
It is absolutely insane. And I think about like the tools that we've had as sales professionals in this game and working on this crap. And, imagine if LinkedIn was there when you first started. Would have been
a game changer.
Yeah. And then you think about the access that people have to information, yet for whatever reason, people fail to use the information that they have access to. I still get requests via LinkedIn about my software development needs and outsourcing part of my software development needs to another team. And if there's nothing on my LinkedIn profile or website that indicates that I do anything that would include software development, I don't have technology. I don't have a product. So why do we not take advantage of the amazing information that's out there?
Well, I have a couple of theories around this. So the first one is we take what we think is the easy way out, which is fast. And we take the traditional mindset of if we throw enough against the wall, some of it will stick. We take the mindset of the cold call. If I can get 80 calls in today or 80 connection requests in today, someone might respond, right? So there is this old thinking ignorance to how the tools that we had available to us in the olden days was the yellow pages and the telephone. So we did volume, hoping and praying someone would pick up and talk to us. It's a very different world today. One of the things we have to do in order to truly leverage what's available to us today is slow down our outreach to speed up our outcome. So we have to take the time where you might have had 80 outreaches back in the day. Let's bring it down to, and I'm just making up a number, but 10 people that we strategically surround ourselves with, find out what matters to them based on the content they're sharing. Look at who their clients are based on who's recommended them on LinkedIn. Take a look at what matters to them. What content are they engaging on? There's so much that we can do in advance so that when we do reach out to that person, they truly feel like they mattered, that we took the time, that we authentically care about them, that we're not using automation, and that we really want to start a conversation with them around a topic that matters to them, right? So part of the move fast is we just share content that we like. Most perfect example, I had a financial advisor who was sharing content on the Market Watch. None of his prospects cared about the Market Watch. And he couldn't understand why the only people engaging on his content were other financial advisors, right? So we have to slow this down. We have to truly care about each of these folks as if we met them in person at a networking event, right? If you're at a networking event, a trade show, a conference, and you walk up to someone, you don't start with a pitch. You start with, hey, hello, what brought you here today, right? We need to small talk with content, but content that matters to them And so the bottom line, and I don't even remember the original question because I sort of went on a tangent. We just have to change the way that we're doing that. It's around how do we take the information that LinkedIn provides us and leverage that to start authentic conversations.
And I think that's a beautiful point. It's authentic conversations because that's what we want. Like if we're clearly focused on helping people solve problems, then let's work with the people that we know have those specific problems, or at least work with the people that we know who likely have those problems. And when we work with them, let's gather information. And when we gather that information, we're going to get better at gathering the information if we build trust. And that trust doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen because I'm wearing a shirt that says, "Hey, trust me." I'm
right.
And
sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
No, so I love that because here's the challenge. As social sellers, we're constantly telling people how we can help them. Stop and just help them. Be a resource. Show up with value. Don't tell them you're going to help them. Help them. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
I got really excited.
Great. One of the other things you said as you were going through this, you talk about slow is smooth, smooth is fast, and really, you didn't say it that way. That's a quote that comes from the special operations group. It is the first group that I've heard use that. I'm sure somebody used that before, and probably it comes out of like Latin new. Or some other language. But there's this idea of if we actually slow down, we can accomplish so much more. But at the same time, we have these management tactics that are out there that are focused on a specific set of KPIs that say, based on the data that we're driving, we need to do X number of outreach, or we need to do whatever. And a lot of times those KPIs come from a book that somebody read or the person who wrote it worked in an organization that's completely different than your organization.
In 1975.
Say that again?
In 1975.
Yeah, well, it's insane. 1975, they're writing this when the technology was completely different. Like we just talked about LinkedIn. I'm fortunate. I actually have Mike Simmons on LinkedIn. It's the only social thing where I actually have my full name on LinkedIn because I got involved I created an account early on in the process. It's the technology changes. And the technology changes at a speed that's faster than the human changes, yet we continue to operate in an environment where we're going to go ahead and use the technology to do a lot of the things that we would do because we had to do them that way in the past. So we do those things faster. Anyhow, really, so as you can tell, this is going to be an awesome conversation. We are just getting started and we're already coming out with a fair amount of intensity. So Brynne, tell us a little bit about kind of what gets you excited when it comes to working with new sales professionals, people who are just starting to get into this profession?
I love that. So, I'll start by saying typically, not everywhere, there are two types of sales professionals. There are brand new sales professionals that understand technology, and there are seasoned sales professionals that understand relationships. But rarely do you find the ones that have both. So I'm a huge fan, and I happen to be an old seasoned professional that understands technology. Not to say that I'm a unicorn, because I'm certainly not. But my goal is to bring the two together, to help the seasoned professionals in a simple way leverage technology without feeling overwhelmed, and the new professional to learn this is relationships. It's they're the first to go to automation. They're the first to go. Like, if I can get volume, if I could get, right? And so was the advice, what would I give a new sales professional? The new sales professional is talk to some seasoned professionals. That's the first thing. Find out how they grew their business and adapt the technology to that strategy, right? So you need to build, it doesn't have to be full on relationships. Here's really, what meaningful conversations from social equals value plus rapport. So I'll say that again. I'll do it backwards. Value plus rapport equals meaningful conversations. A lot of people say you've got to build relationships. Relationships take time. You can't truly build a relationship on social. It's got to come off of social. one-on-one Zoom meetings, phone calls, right? You have to get to know them off social, but you can build rapport. You can build a connection with someone that's strong enough that they say, you're worth 15 minutes of my time. And the only way to really get that going is the value. And then the little chit chat where they feel like you took the time for them. That's what becomes that meaningful Zoom call or first conversation.
I think we've all experienced it where we've had a really, really short conversation with someone, but it's been impactful.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be a 3-hour discussion or, a set of discussions over a 10 or 12-month period. We can have a short conversation with someone that's impactful. I was on a plane a number of years ago, and I was on with I think he was an executive at a company that works in the aluminum space. And we started talking about innovation in aluminum. And before that conversation, I would never have thought to put those two things together.
Right.
Yet the impactful part of that brief conversation is that it shifted my perspective to say, how do other industries who are not on the emerging tech side of things drive innovation inside their organizations and start thinking about innovation? Very short conversation, high impact. Now, I can't name the name of the person. I don't remember the company that he was with. The story had an impact here, but that was a short period of time. It didn't need to be long and drawn out. And when you talk about that equation, value, rapport, those two things really helped accelerated impact. So really cool.
I love that story.
So
I have lots of plane stories.
You have a lot. Yeah, I used to have lots of plane stories. I feel like I haven't been on a plane in a while, other than personal stuff recently.
Me too.
I'm looking forward to that shifting around.
March, I go to Vegas for a sales kickoff. That's my first back to normal travel.
That's awesome. And it's good to see things starting to open up. How do you anticipate an event like that shifting or changing when you get this environment? Like, you think about the energy that there is in a room when you're in a room and you've got a lot of people. And then you think about how you create energy when you're on a Zoom call and you have to look around and see where the energy is, but you can't feel the same thing that's in the room with the people. So you look at a lot of the nonverbal and you hope that people are nodding their heads and smiling and all of that. What's something that excites you about being in that kind of environment where you're going to feel that energy, and what do you expect?
So I'm going to answer that with two, because I'm going to talk about how to do it on Zoom. But a lot of people are scared to get on stage. Even Barbara Streisand is said to have incredible nerves. There's something programmed in my brain that's broken, because it's like a roller coaster. I can't wait. I'm in line. I can't wait to go. I am fed from the energy in the room. And making even eye contact with a couple of people and watching how they feel like they know I'm looking at them feeds me, right? So I absolutely, the bigger the stage, the bigger the audience, the more excited I am. The interesting thing is they have a whole team in China that they would have normally flown out. So I'm also going to be I will be broadcast in China while I'm in Vegas for the rest of the company. I'm really super excited. So because that's what feeds me and gives me energy, I had to find, how do I do that on Zoom? So 2 tips. Number 1, get them engaged in chat, right? So if you say something and you're like, you have something of real impact, if you agree, put an exclamation in chat. So then, versus just trying to figure out who am I looking at? And some people aren't even on camera, even though their boss said they had to be on camera. Get them in chat going, because you may have made an impact. And normally you would have seen the eyes open and the jaws drop, and you're not getting that, but you can get fed by the reaction in chat.
Very cool.
So get them. And the other thing is, take advantage of breakout rooms.
Yeah.
Right? Like and then hop into the breakout rooms and, that's just the 2 ways to get that engagement.
How do you like to use breakout rooms?
So I typically so maybe there's a teaching. We teach how do you use a poll to start sales conversations. Then we're going to go into a breakout room for 20 minutes with 3 people. And you guys are going to write your polls together and say, is this something you'd want to vote on? Is this right? And so I give them a lesson. They get a form to fill out, like 140 characters for the question, 30 characters for and so at the end of that breakout, they've actually workshopped what they learned. And so not only did they learn one strategic way to do something, but they can go back to their desk and implement.
Awesome. Very cool. So let's talk about where you focus your attention, like this gift of being the LinkedIn whisperer. So what is it about either your approach or the way that you engage with people that resonates with folks?
Yeah. It's interesting. I was on a Clubhouse audio room this morning, and they asked me, what value have you gotten from being a moderator on Clubhouse? And I said, the best thing Clubhouse ever did for me is it created an opportunity for me to teach a very visual education with audio only, right? So I honed my training skills that if I can have you visualize how to implement, make it very simple, very clear, and make you, the audience, absolutely confident that you can implement without ever even seeing LinkedIn, then I know that when I go into training, I keep it to that simplicity. Like really hone in on this is the information and the only information you need to be successful here. Typically, it starts with a story, so you know the why. Then it will go into the strategy of the thinking about, like, this is how we're going to do this, and these are the results, and then the tactics. So it's story, strategy, tactic. And when so I think you asked me, kind of what is my style? My style is to make it so easy that my audience is confident they can implement. Not like, wow, that was really good. Now what do I do? Right. And I think that's the difference.
So let's talk about story. What are some of the things that people get wrong when thinking about story?
Well, it's interesting. We want to keep our stories as authentic as possible, but I do believe that we have permission to edit and change things slightly for the value of what the story brings, right? So, and simplify it. I'll leave a lot of information out of a story because it's not important to the listener, to the participant. So the important thing about the story, in my opinion, is it's got to start with, here was the challenge that they had.
Mm-hmm.
Here was the impact of that challenge or of the not changing the challenge. Here's why they came to me. Here's what we did, and here's the result. Now, you do it in a way that, that's like a case story.
Sure. Yep.
If it's your own story, which I tell a lot of, here was the challenge. So I'm gonna tell one. Okay.
Yep.
So I loved sales. I hated cold calling. And in 1992, I was sitting in front of one of my clients, staring at his overflowing Rolodex. And then I'll say to an audience, anyone here still have a Rolodex? Anyone here never heard of a Rolodex, right? Like that becomes my shtick. I aged myself. We have fun, right? So, so I'm engaging in that way. So I will say, by the way, in Zoom, if you have a Rolodex, put an R in chat. If you don't know what a Rolodex is, put a question mark, right? So I'm engaging that. Yep. So staring at his overflowing Rolodex, thinking if I could get my hands on that for 20 minutes, I could identify who he knew that I wanted to meet. And I'd never ask for introductions and I'd never have to make another cold call again. So that was my challenge. I went, ooh, if I could do this, fast forward 2 decades. And I found LinkedIn. And LinkedIn allows us to filter and search our connections, to identify who our clients and our networking partners know, so we can leverage our relationships to either get introductions or permission to name drop. And that's when I fell in love with LinkedIn as a sales tool. So that was my story. The strategy kind of came in like our strategy is to search and filter our connections. Yep. Now we go into the tactics of it. So before I teach you how to do this, I teach you why.
Yeah, really powerful. So there's a couple of things that jump out at me while you're going through the story as you break it down into a couple of pieces. There's this vision that you have of the future that's better than what your current state is. This objective, this thing, this pot of gold at the end of the rainbow where you're looking at it, you're like, wow, if I could only have that.
Yeah.
And it's so close. I can feel it. I can touch it. And then it's, oh, wow, there's actually a way to do this now because someone has solved for a component of that. And so now it's, hey, there's this vision of the future that is really exciting. And someone has come in and created a path to help you get there. So now you start to say, this is really cool. No longer is this a challenge that I've got to deal. No longer is it a challenge that I've got to worry about not being able to solve for. I actually have a plan that will allow some tactics that will help me solve for it. And then now it gets into, okay, so you know that there's a problem. You see that there's a solution out there. How do you go out and actually use the data, use the information? So all of that together without saying, I'm going to tell you why LinkedIn is the most amazing thing to help you get quickly to the connections of those connections who have connections. So you never have to make a cold call today. One of them is an exciting view. The other one is just noise that gets lost in translation. So really, really, really powerful. So now you move into more of the so you've got people leaning in and excited about it. They're engaged. And I really like how you brought it back to the Zoom piece about, hey, if I've never seen a Rolodex. Yep. So really cool stuff. Did I hear everything? What did I miss?
Yeah, no, that's great. But there's 5 elements, right? That you said they get them to lean in. They have to resonate with the story. They have to go, oh, this is a story. I want client referrals.
Yep.
You have to create curiosity like, ooh, I would love to get their Rolodex. You have to teach them something new or they're gone, right?
Yep.
And what you teach them needs to get them to think differently about the way they're currently doing it.
Yep.
Number 5 is it needs to create a compelling moment. So on social, it's a like, a comment, I accept your connection request. We can't start conversations with lurkers, right? We have to convert the lurker into an engager. And so with what we just said, when that content is on LinkedIn, it's got to create a compelling moment. Sometimes it's a question, a poll, something that gets them to say, I want to engage on this, because we can't start conversations with people that haven't engaged. We don't know who they are. You may put something out and you have 328 views, 3 reactions. So there are 325 people. We don't know who they are. The more we can convert from that lurker to engager, the more conversations we can start.
It sounds like you've been watching my LinkedIn feed because I get all these views, but I don't get a lot of the engagement. So what's something that I could do differently? It sounds like I could ask questions that might help with engagement. Any other things that come to mind? What do you see that helps? And I know we went through the 5 points. What are some other ways that people can get that type of engagement that you're talking about?
So I love that. When you ask a question, ask it to a specific person. So who is your buyer?
So for me today, who is my buyer? These are individuals who are shifting the business a bit. So individuals who are struggling with taking that next step because of either a lack of confidence or lack of comfort. And that lack of confidence or comfort comes from the unknown. So there's a challenge. They've got this thing that's getting in the way of them taking the next step that gets them moving forward.
Is it a professional or just an individual?
Yeah. So it's a professional. There's 3 groups. Professionals who've been working in their craft for a period of time and think there's something more. They just want to move forward. So they're going to be very aspirational in their thinking about and their vision around what's next. professional. So they've already got experience. They've demonstrated a capability to do something. This second group are...
Well, we'll just stick with the first for
Perfect.
this example.
Good. Yep.
If that's okay. So the example would be, did you know that most seasoned professionals get stuck, hit plateaus throughout their career? What is the one thing you've done to overcome that plateau? Right. So that we're going to start a conversation around that. And now we're seeing people that have hit plateaus.
Yeah.
And they're talking about this. It's all positive. It's all, we're not asking them, are you stuck?
Yeah.
Right. But what have you done now? And I'd give more meat to that.
Sure.
Here are 3 things that entrepreneurs have done to overcome. What have you done? So there's some education in it.
Yep.
They're thinking differently. Ooh, I haven't done that. So you're teaching them. But now we post it. And typically, maybe we put in a few hashtags. So we're hoping and praying people that follow those hashtags will see it. But here's the thing. The LinkedIn algorithm is very interesting. The more engagement you get in the first hour and then 2 hours, the more LinkedIn says, hey, this is relevant.
Mm-hmm.
So I would then, there's a little paper airplane send at the bottom of every post. And I would take inventory of my connections and say, ooh, there are 18 entrepreneurs in my network that I'd love to get their perspective on this. So I send it to them, conversation, right? So I go, hey, Mike, as someone that works closely with entrepreneurs, I'd love your insights in comments. Thanks in advance for your participation. And then if I send that out, maybe 25 to 50%, depending on my rapport with you, will actually engage. And they're looking at this as totally positive. I'm sharing my positive thing. I'm giving advice to the world, and I'm getting response. Now, if you flipped this and said, what is the one thing that got you stuck? You'd have like a 2%. Nobody wants to talk about publicly about what got them stuck. So we want to make sure we're asking for their thought leadership and their education, not their baggage.
It's a really powerful perspective, a huge shift for me, because there's value in the authenticity and the transparency and the vulnerability associated with things that you had to overcome. However, it takes a bit to get people comfortable with doing that. Not everybody's comfortable sharing that. People want to share the highlight reel. So how can you take the positive and continue to drive and reinforce the positive in the questions in the area of focus? Very, very powerful stuff. And I think it's important for, not to turn this into a preaching kind of thing, but it's important for people to take that away and really listen to it. Because when you're going through, before you hit send or you put that post out there, say, like, ask those questions around, what's the impact? How is this going to be received? What are my desired results? Rather than going through the motions. And I think I've found myself just going through the motions lately when it comes to posting and putting information out there on LinkedIn. That's pretty powerful. Thank you.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Okay. So you get 12 people that comment,
Yep.
and you really worked this. You invested an hour in finding the right people, getting it into the inbox, crafting the right message that's going to get them interested. And so now we've got these 12 great ideas. And we go into Canva, which is a free tool for graphics. And we highlight each of these tips. They put it out publicly, right? Each of these tips from top entrepreneurs in what they did. And we make a little ebook. And before we publish it, we send it to them and say, I'm going to be publishing it. I grabbed your quote. Are you comfortable with this? Now they're like, oh my gosh, they're highlighting my quote, right? Now we've got, right? And they've become so important now, right? Like you've made them. So we have enough. And then in the ebook, I take the link to because it's a digital ebook, right? I take the link to the post in the first page. I'll say, this is based on a post that we recently put out. Now we've got this great piece of content. And depending on what you want to do, you can say, I'd love to, if you want to kind of talk through this quote, I'd love to get on a quick 15-minute call with you so I can hone it down to be your best thought. And now we already targeted these people on purpose. Yeah. So now we take this. Notice there's no sales call in this. This is rapport building. This is about highlighting them. we need, again, I'm going to say it again, we need to slow down our outreach to speed up our outcome. This is just about getting to know them, learning about them. If we can show up in a way that matters to them and then bring a little value, and we can talk about that. How do you bring a little value to someone at this point? We can build the right relationship, because now we're building that relationship. It's moved from rapport to relationship, and the sale will come when the time is right. Yeah. And by the way, they won't shop because you're already important to them.
A couple of powerful things, again, come out of what you've shared there. One, the importance of being genuine in the way that you're engaging with people. Like, this is not a, hey, I'm going to see what I can do to trick you into doing something. This is, I've done the work. You're with someone who it fits within this ideal customer profile that I've got. The feedback that you gave and the comments that you made are actually really interesting. And there are other people who are going to find those things valuable. I'm going to promote those out. This is not about trying to trick people. It's about genuinely engaging with people and building that rapport. I think that's a really important thing to highlight. One of the other things that came up was the word value. So when someone says value, what does that mean to you, Brynne?
Well, the interesting thing is value is in the eyes of the recipient. Yeah. So because I think it's value doesn't mean it's value. So one of the mistakes we make as salespeople, like my financial advisor who was sharing Market Watch, is we share things we want to share. And we have to start sharing things that have an impact, vendor agnostic impact. That's the real value piece. If they need another step with you to get value from it, then it wasn't value, it was a pitch. Value is standalone that gets them, teaches them something new, that gets them thinking differently, and maybe can even implement without ever having talked to you.
So when you think about this perception of value and where that sits, how can we get better at understanding what others value?
There's a lot of different ways to do that. First, we have to get in a mindset of social listening, right? We have to start looking at what are our current clients and prospects engaging on? What kind of content? Polls can help us understand what matters to them. What is the number one priority in 2022? We can ask those questions. We can look at, this is something I used to do, and hopefully I'll be able to do it again, is I would look at keynote speakers for conferences and what is the topic, breakout speakers at conferences. What are those topics for conferences that my prospects are going to, right? Who are the major influencers in their industry? Not my industry.
Yep.
In their industry. And what podcasts are they listening to? So there's 3 ways to get content to people. There's one to many. We share it on our newsfeed. There's one to few. I've identified the 18 people that I'd like to vote on this, or I'd like to get their comments on this. And there's one to one. I'm like, hey, Mike, really enjoyed being a guest on your podcast, right? There's no way that is as personal as it can be, right? Like, sure. Yep. Clearly. And so we need to make sure, first of all, that we're leveraging all 3 of those in the right way. But again, I forgot what the original question was. But so
it's just a conversation. It's like, you see, this is, Brynne, I don't know if you drink, but I've got a bourbon I don't have a bourbon in my head. It's a little
whiskey.
Bit too early in the morning, but this would be, me having a bourbon, you having a glass of wine. And
that's my whiskey sour.
Whiskey sour. Perfect. So we're going through and we're breaking down components of understanding people's perspective relative to how they perceive value, how they perceive value. And there's so many different ways to go out and do it. And one of the things that, again, that Brynne, just to repeat, because so many of these are really, really powerful nuggets of information that can help shift our own perspective as we go out and do the work that we all do. How are we listening in social rather than shouting in social? And how are we taking the time to pause, listen, and then process so that we can engage in the context of what we know is important to others rather than just shouting and shouting and shouting and shouting and saying, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me. And it's the visual that comes up, and in the context of simplifying things, just take a look in the mirror. When you take a look in the mirror, you'll likely see that you have two ears and one mouth. If you have two ears and one mouth, it's probably by design in one way, shape, or form. Let's take time and listen, even when and I know that when we're listening on social, we're actually watching things, but we're then consuming the information. We should then take it, do something, process it, and then start to share or engage. But take time to listen. Don't just go out there to communicate and continue to add crap into the cesspool of information and noise that's out there. The other thing I really like that you broke out, and I'm a big fan of the structure. I think about it from a demand gen perspective when thinking about marketing, and marketing is not my background, but when thinking about demand gen, it's one to many. How do we get information out to the masses? One to one. How do I engage as a direct rep? And then indirect channel, how does channel go out? Not really incorporated the one to few. Starting to see a lot of that in the account-based marketing type stuff. Mm-hmm. But the point is, as Brynne is smiling and we're nodding as we're engaged in this, the point is stop overcomplicating this crap. Be deliberate about what format you're using, where you're going to pull information from, how you plan to use it, and use the right tools at the right time. You got me on a rant, Brynne. So thanks.
Oh, thanks. That was awesome. I'm going to take a couple of those nuggets myself.
So how can we be better social listeners?
Oh, so we're going to go back to that slow down your outreach to speed up your outcome, right? So some of it, and it depends, you touched on ABM, account-based marketing. We call it A.C.S, which is account-centric sales.
Okay.
Most people are not assigned 40 accounts, but we believe there is a lot of merit to going after specific accounts, but you don't have to be limited to those. So if you're at the account-centric sales mindset, pick 5 companies this month that you want to pursue, 3 companies, whatever. Doesn't mean you're not going to do a lot of the other activity, but pick a few that you're going to focus on. And you're going to spend the first 2 weeks of this month learning. Half of your time should be listening and learning. I'm going to go back to the olden days. I think there's Miller Hyman, green sheets, blue sheets, gold sheets, right?
Yep.
If any of you, I'm aging myself here, but actually Liz Hyman, who is Stephen Hyman's daughter, is one of my close friends. So I'm no connection to the conversation, but back to the sheets. We would get these gigantic sheets on big pads, and we would put the name of an account, and there would be 10 spots to fill out the influencers and decision makers. And there would be all of these questions that we had to gather before we could make the first call. Like there would be, and one of the sheets was on a specific person and everything we had to fill out. One of the sheets was on the whole account, and they were all color, they were color sheets. So we knew exactly where they were and what we were using it for. And I would say on an account, we would probably spend almost an entire day filling out a sheet on one company. That was research. That was listening, right? And the power behind the insight was when we came to the table, we had a lot of our questions answered, and we had a lot of questions that came to the surface that we wouldn't have known to ask. So we take this mindset of the blue sheets, the green sheets, the gold sheets, and we put it to our social selling activity. Buyer map your clients. Know the 8 to 10 people that you will probably engage with throughout your sales process. If it's a more complex sale, if you're selling to a smaller business, Google them. You may find a press release. You may identify, there's digitally, they've got a huge footprint, even the smaller companies that you can dig things up on. And if not, go research their industry. Look at their recommendations if they have any. If on their website they have testimonials, go a deep dive on who they sold to, because they care about their client's industry, not just their own, right? So there are so many things that we can do to fill out the proverbial blue sheets, green sheets, gold sheets, right? There's so many things that we can do to do that research before we reach out. The other thing, I'm just going to say
I was just going to say, as you're going through this, what you're hearing Brynne do as she focuses on the research is she's asking questions in context, asking questions of public information.
Yes.
And sometimes I think we forget about that. We feel like when we're asking questions, we've got to ask the question of somebody right across the Zoom or across the table or in the room with us. This really cool tool that you can ask questions in. There was one of them way back when called Ask Jeeves, as we age some of the tech, but you can ask questions in Google or in LinkedIn or in your Twitter search and gather that information.
Yeah, in Quora. I mean, you can literally ask questions and get answers. You also look at their company page and what have they shared. Look at there's so many places to get that information. Now, I'll tell you one of I hate to say pet peeves, but if someone is trying to sell me, and we connected on LinkedIn and somehow they got me to schedule a call with them. And the first question I go, "Hey, Mike, great to see you. Where are you from?" I'm like, "Are you friggin' kidding me?" And hey, I noticed you're from the Phoenix area. My son went to ASU. Okay, right? You want to make sure that you've done your research, because if you say, "Where really?" Like you're going to but I can build that rapport immediately. Like, "Oh, you're from the Phoenix area. My son went to ASU. We have something to talk about. And you feel like you mattered." I took that 30 seconds to find out where you're from.
Well, and I automatically know that you're a good parent and you've raised the son with good decision-making capability and judgment and decide to go to an amazing school. And that's what, and our 19-year-old is a freshman at ASU now.
Yeah, so I got twin 19-year-olds at Penn State.
So funny thing about Penn State, I looked at going to Penn State. I lived in high school in Southern California. I looked at Penn State. And when I started looking at Penn State, I realized Penn State isn't just a university in an area. There are all of these universities that are spread across. And now ASU is starting to operate a similar kind of model. We digress. But there's this whole piece about going out, asking those questions of information, but you've got to know what questions to ask before you start asking those questions. So take the time inside your organization to say, "Hey, you know what? We've seen these patterns go up. I wonder why." Or we tend to work with these organizations who've done these kind of things. I wonder if this organization has done that. And I know this sounds super, super remedial and early stage and so freaking basic, but I can tell you, based on what I see in my LinkedIn feed, and when people connect with me and I accept those connections, that people are not doing this. They're taking the volume approach of spray and pray rather than a sniper rifle, very targeted approach of going after the right specific target. Do the work, please. Just do the work.
Do the work. Thank you. So social selling is simple, but it's not easy.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? It's simple. The things to do. And you probably like, "Ooh, that's a great idea. That sounds simple to do," but it takes work. There's no pixie dust. Like there's no magic wand or button to push, right? And this is all of sales, right? If you know how to do it right, it works. But it takes practice, and it takes being very thoughtful, and it takes a process. Without a process, I know that's a big thing for you, right? Without having a process in place, it's just random acts of social. There's and you'll get random results. But if you can put together a process that's simple to follow, it will become easier. It will become a habit. It will become just part of the fabric of your day.
You'll avoid a lot of the distractions that come up when something shiny or new pops up and people are saying, "Well, we need to do this," or "We need to do that." And there's a lot of "we need to do" kind of stuff. And not even need. It's more, sometimes the "we need to" comes up when people don't have a background or don't have a level of experience and they hear somebody else saying that this worked. So now we need to do it. And the other view could be, well, there's a lot of stuff that we could do. So we could do all of those things, but should we do them? And when Brynne is talking about the simplifying this, it's simplifying things to basic approaches that work, that take time, and keeping a high level of focus on those basic things because they are simple, but it's not easy to avoid the distractions that will come up that will try to reprioritize your time. So keep this level of focus. And whether it's a Post-it note that you stick up on your monitor to remind you, did I ask a question? Am I listening? Am I worried about what's important to the person on the other end rather than just promoting my values, like me sharing Market Watch? Just take the time. Brynne, this conversation has been absolutely awesome. And I had no doubt before. I'm really happy. And I can't wait to have you come back on. There's a lot of ground that we covered. How do we bring that together so people can say, okay, here are things I should either be thinking about, doing, focused on, and start putting this work into action?
I love that. I know you talk a lot about process and framework, and we have a 5-step framework. I do 5s a lot, apparently. But the first one is developing that value-centric profile, moving it from a resume to a resource, so that the first impressions that your buyers get when they get to your profile is that you're really here to help. You're not just telling them how you can help them, you're actually helping them. Number 2 is the social listening piece, right? Have a system in place that before you reach out to an account or to a prospect, that you have a little checklist of these are the things I'm going to look for so that I can establish rapport in a way that matters to them. Number 3, make sure you have a strategy for content that creates engagement, right? Like purely about starting conversations that is not leading with your solution, but will lead people to your solution. So that content isn't about you, your company, your pitch. It's just starting like kind of these conversations that can lead to the right sales conversation or insights conversation down the road. Number 4, nurture your existing connections. We connect and forget. We can collect all these business cards and put the rubber bands around them and stick them in the corner of our desk. That's what we're doing on LinkedIn. So take inventory of your existing connections and identify who you've been ignoring that you should be starting a conversation with. We actually have all our clients export our connections into an Excel spreadsheet, make a column, and we say it's conducting CPR. We're breathing life back into them, but we're also identifying clients, prospects, and referral partners, CPR. Number 5, once we've identified clients and referral partners, different from prospects, we talk about the things we want from clients, but one of them, which we touched on earlier, is we want to leverage their Rolodex to build a list of the people that they know, right? So we search their connections, bring a list of people to our clients and our referral partners, and ask for insights. How well do you know this person? Do you think they could use my services? Is this someone you think makes sense for me to have a conversation with? And depending on your relationship, you can either ask for an introduction or permission to name drop. That's the 5.
Brynne, you are absolutely awesome. Where can people find you and pay attention to the work that you're putting out there? Where would you like people to connect with you?
So I know there's always supposed to be, from a marketing standpoint, one call to action. I'm going to do 2, though. Break all the marketing rules. We have a free membership at linkedinlibrary.com. There's a ton of content, totally free forever. And then we have our program at socialsaleslink.com/12week. It is a 12-week LinkedIn sales accelerator that is a combination of self-paced. Well, it's not really completely self-paced. It's guided learning. So every day you'll get it 5 days a week. You'll get an email with some videos to watch and assignments to do. You'll be assigned a coach that you'll have 3 sessions with. And we have 2 group coaching sessions every single week for the 12 weeks. And then you can continue on for coaching if you want to. It's a crazy, amazing package. Go to socialsaleslink.com/12week to learn more.
Awesome. Check out the 12-week program. Go to the link. We'll include links in the show notes. Brynne, this has been an absolutely awesome conversation. Thanks for doing this. If you know of somebody out there who would benefit from this conversation, please share it. Let Brynne and I know via LinkedIn. Sales is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about yours?